The past has begun to speak, and historians are horrified by what it's saying. Imagine a book whose pages turn to dust at a single glance. This used to mean the end, silence. But today, neural networks act as a digital time machine. They see through the earth, read charred parchment, and translate the languages of dead empires. This isn't science fiction. This is happening right now. We're talking about 300,000 shattered Babylonian clay tablets. 800 scrolls burned at 500 degrees Celsius, 932 degrees Fahrenheit. Ciphers that the world's greatest minds couldn't crack for 70 years. For humans, it was a wall. For a machine, it was just a dataset. History textbooks are just one version, a convenient version. Today, we'll show you how code is shattering it before your very eyes. A Bible written by another hand. Bloody messages erased from the face of the earth 2,000 years ago. Unsolvable ciphers once dismissed as the ramblings of a madman. And we'll start with humanity's most important book, a text considered flawless for 70 years, monolithic, unified. It turned out to be a forgery. The year is 1947, the Judean desert. The air shimmers with heat, and dry rocks cut at the feet. A Bedouin shepherd, searching for a lost goat, stumbles upon a dark opening in a cliff, a cave. Inside are dusty clay jars, untouched for 2,000 years. Inside these jars are leather scrolls, the greatest archaeological find of the 20th century. And the main artifact among them is the 7-meter, 23-foot scroll of the prophet Isaiah. 54 columns of perfect monolithic text in ancient Hebrew. A copy 1,000 years older than any other known version. For 70 years, the world's leading paleographers examined it under a microscope. For 70 years, they compared every letter, every curve of the pen. And the verdict was unanimous. Etched in the granite of academic science, the scroll was written from beginning to end by one person. One genius, one prophet. His handwriting was absolutely, supernaturally identical across all 7 meters of text. Now, you might say, so what? One author, two? What's the difference? The difference is colossal. A text transcribed by a lone prophet in a moment of divine revelation is one thing. A text created by a team, following a template like a factory project, is something else entirely. It changes the very nature of a sacred book, transforming it from a miracle into a document. But it was impossible to prove. The human eye saw no difference. For 70 years, everyone agreed with the lone author theory. It was beautiful and convenient, and it would have held up to this day, until a machine sees what is hidden from humans entered the game. Researchers at the University of Groningen decided to test the theory that had been considered a granite axiom for 70 years. They didn't reread the text. They took a single letter, the letter Aleph, the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet. They fed 5,000 digitized images of it from the scroll into a neural network. The machine wasn't taught to read. It was taught to analyze the biometrics of the handwriting, the microscopic, invisible changes in the pen's angle, pressure, and curvature of the lines. The things that betray muscle memory, fatigue, and the tension in a hand. The things that create a unique fingerprint for every scribe. A machine doesn't look for meaning. It looks for a person. Stop. And this is where the system flagged an anomaly. The author's biometric signature was stable. Perfectly stable. But exactly at the 27th column of the text, it changes abruptly, catastrophically. The algorithm proved with mathematical certainty that 2 different people wrote the scroll. The second scribe so masterfully forged and copied the style of the first that he deceived the entire academic world for 70 years. This isn't just a correction for a textbook. This is a death sentence for the lone prophet theory. The creation of humanity's most important book was not an act of revelation. It was a symbiotic, almost factory-like collaboration between 2 masters. A cold algorithm, an artificial intelligence, caught an ancient forger red-handed after 2,000 years. And it gets worse. Because if a machine can expose an author who is hiding in plain sight, can it read what no one else could? Not even Alan Turing, the man who broke Nazi Germany's code. The Voynich manuscript. The year is 1912. Imagine a book that stares back at you. 240 pages of parchment, filled with writing in a language that doesn't exist, with illustrations of plants not found on Earth, with maps of a starry sky we do not see. This isn't just a mystery, it's an intellectual black hole that has been sucking in the world's best minds for over a century. The FBI's top cryptographers tried to crack it during the Cold War, thinking it was a Soviet spy cipher. Alan Turing himself, the man who broke the Enigma code and saved millions of lives, struggled with it. The result was zero. Absolute ringing silence. And so the scientific community did what it always does when faced with the impossible. It gave up. The official verdict was a condemnation. It was either the ravings of a mad alchemist or a brilliant medieval forgery. Nonsense. A convenient explanation to close the case and never return to it. I also thought it was just a beautiful story. Until I saw where the theory cracks. But a neural network approached the text differently. It didn't try to translate it. It analyzed its mathematical structure. The frequency of symbols, the length of words, the entropy, the degree to which the text is ordered. And this is where the system flagged an anomaly. The machine's verdict was unequivocal. This is not gibberish. It was a real, structured language that followed all linguistic laws. It was just encrypted. And there's more. The algorithm ran the manuscript structure against hundreds of known languages, from Latin to Chinese. And with 80% probability, it determined that the basis is ancient Hebrew. But it's not just Hebrew. It's a double cipher. First, the author rearranged the letters in each word according to a complex algorithm. This is called an anagram. Then, he removed all the vowels from the result. Stop. Think about that for a second. The machine proved this is not nonsense. It's a brilliant lock created by a mind centuries ahead of its time, and we have just found the lockpick for it. The official, convenient, and simple theory is dead. Artificial intelligence can read ciphers. But can it see what time itself has erased? The Nazca Desert, Peru. The wind carries scorching sand that cuts the skin and crunches between your teeth. From the ground, you see nothing. Just scratches on the scorched earth, chaotic lines stretching to the horizon. Only from a height of hundreds of feet do they form giant drawings. Pilots first noticed them in 1927, and a beautiful legend was born: landing strips for an alien spaceport. Convenient, beautiful, inexplicable. A theory that requires no proof because it captures the imagination. And everyone was content with that. But in 2022, researchers from Yamagata University in Japan and engineers from IBM fed laser scan data of the plateau into a neural network. The machine didn't look at the drawings. It searched for millimeter-level changes in elevation, traces that the wind had almost completely erased over 2,000 years. Traces invisible to the human eye. And here is what it found. 168 new geoglyphs. But these weren't just new animals. The AI discovered horrifying figures, killer whales with knives, humanoids with square heads, and, most disturbingly, people holding severed heads. And they weren't on the flat plains, but on the slopes of hills, along ancient trails. The theory of alien landing strips died that day. The machine proved that these were giant, bloody road signs for ancient travelers, markers delineating territory with images of death gods. They were made to be seen from a neighboring hill, not from space. This was a language of the land that we had forgotten how to read. Artificial intelligence sees the erased, but can it read the burned? The year is 79 AD. Mount Vesuvius. The air smells of sulfur, the ground trembles, a pyroclastic flow, A wall of superheated gas and ash at 500 degrees Celsius, 932 degrees Fahrenheit, engulfs the town of Herculaneum. It doesn't bury it in ash like Pompeii. It preserves it, carbonizes it, instantly. Inside one of the villas is a private library, the only library from the ancient world to survive intact. About 800 papyrus scrolls. They didn't burn to ash. They were baked, turned into charred, brittle lumps of carbon. For 2,000 years, any attempt to unroll such a scroll turned it into black dust. It was a lost library. Forever. The end of the story. Until Professor Brent Seals from the University of Kentucky took on the challenge. He didn't try to unroll them. He passed them through a synchrotron, a powerful X-ray machine that created a 3D digital model of each charred lump with micron-level resolution. He could virtually unroll the scroll without touching it. But there was a problem. The ink used by the Romans was carbon-based. Carbon on carbon. The X-ray couldn't see the difference. The text was completely invisible. It seemed like a dead end, another beautiful technology that hit a wall. And this is where the human eye gave up, and the machine took over. The neural network wasn't taught to read letters. It was taught to see what the X-ray couldn't, the microscopic texture left by the ink on the papyrus surface. The machine wasn't looking for color, but for volume. It learned to see the traces of letters the way forensic scientists see erased fingerprints. Thousands of hours of machine learning, terabytes of data, and in October 2023, the system produced a result. The first word read from the ashes in 2,000 years. Porphyros. Porphyros. Purple. This isn't just a word, it's a key. A key to thousands of lost books from antiquity that we thought were destroyed forever. The AI has already extracted entire paragraphs of a philosophical treatise on pleasure written by the Epicurean Philodemus from this black carbon. Think about that for a second. Somewhere in those same charred lumps could be the lost works of Aristotle, the second part of his Poetics, dialogues we only know by name. The history of literature as we knew it is over. It is being rewritten right now by lines of code that can read ash. Artificial intelligence is resurrecting texts, but that's not its limit. Can it resurrect an entire language? Bring back the voice of an empire erased from the face of the earth. Imagine an empire that controlled the entire Silk Road 2,000 years ago, a giant state at the crossroads of worlds, from China to Rome. The Kushan Empire. All that remains are ruins, coins with portraits of bearded kings, and inscriptions. A text that no one could read for 70 years. For 70 years, the world's best minds looked at these symbols and understood nothing. The problem was, there was no key, no Rosetta Stone of their own, a bilingual inscription that could help crack the code. And so, official science did what it always does when faced with an inconvenient anomaly. It closed the case. The verdict was simple and convenient. This is not a language. These are just forgeries by illiterate craftsmen. Meaningless scratches on stone, imitating real writing. The theory was convenience. But this is where it died. Wait. Artificial intelligence approached the task differently. In 2023, a group of linguists from the University of Cologne fed all known images of these symbols into a neural network. The machine didn't try to translate them, it looked for patterns. The algorithm was based on a simple, ironclad logic. Kings always write their names and titles. Always. Names and titles are anchors that are repeated in different texts. And this is where the neural network latched onto a name. The name of King Vima Taktu, which was known from the neighboring Bactrian language. By matching the name and titles, the machine began to assign sounds to the symbols. And the code cracked. Just like that. After 70 years of silence. Remember the theory about illiterate craftsmen? It crumbled to dust. The AI has deciphered 60% of the signs. And it has proven that this was a completely new, previously unknown language from the East Iranian family. Not a forgery, not nonsense. The machine has brought back from oblivion the voice spoken by millions of people. An entire empire is speaking to us again, after 2,000 years. But those were all intact inscriptions, whole stones. What if we don't even have that? What if all that's left of the most ancient history of humanity are not texts, but hundreds of thousands of broken clay fragments? Think about that for a second. Imagine not just a book, but the entire literature of humanity, all its mythology, smashed with a hammer into 300,000 pieces. This is exactly what the legacy of King Ashurbanipal looks like. His library in Nineveh was not made of scrolls. It was clay tablets. When the city fell, the library burned, and the fragile clay shattered into hundreds of thousands of pieces. The ancient Epic of Gilgamesh, the Babylonian creation myths, all of it became a giant, unsolvable puzzle. And now, cinematic sensorics. The basements of the British Museum. Dust that is over a century old. The smell of old clay and absolute hopelessness. Tens of thousands of boxes filled with broken shards. For 130 years, the world's best Syriologists tried to assemble this puzzle by hand. 130 years. It's a hellish Sisyphean task. A fragment from London could be a perfect match for a fragment stored in a museum in Iraq, or in Berlin. The chance of finding a match was almost zero. Science had hit a physical limit. The human brain, a human life, is too short for such a task. It seemed destined to remain a pile of clay garbage forever. But a machine has no concept of hopelessness. The project was named Fragmentarium. The AI doesn't look at the fragments with eyes, it analyzes their 3D digital scans. It sees what humans ignore: the microscopic shape of the edges, the depth of each crack, and, most importantly, it sees the incomplete cuneiform signs right on the break line. And the system started finding matches. Stop. Grasp the scale of this. The machine began connecting fragments that were physically located in different countries. Fragments that a human would never have been able to match, not even in 1,000 years. What was impossible became routine, and here is the result. The algorithm has already found and joined hundreds of fragments. It has restored previously unknown lost lines from the Epic of Gilgamesh. It has found new pieces of Babylonian myths about creation and the Great Flood. This isn't just repairing a broken vase. Right now, a machine is finishing the primordial story of humanity, assembling it from dust and fragments. We have exposed forgeries, cracked codes, and resurrected languages. One last question remains. What was it all for? What great secrets did the ancients hide? This is where it gets uncomfortable. Mesopotamia, the cradle of civilization. Hundreds of thousands of 5,000-year-old clay tablets lie in museum basements. They lie there as dead weight. The air in these vaults smells of dust and time, and every clay brick is silent. Silent because there is no one to read it. Cuneiform is a translator's nightmare. Hundreds of signs, thousands of meanings that change with context. To decipher one tablet, an Assyriologist needs weeks, sometimes months. To translate all the archives we already possess, humanity would need centuries. Centuries. That is why 99% of this heritage is just inventory numbers on shelves, unread letters, misunderstood laws, forgotten myths. The greatest archive in human history is mute. Listen. What did we expect from these texts? What revelation? You know the answer. We hope to find everything that official science calls fairy tales, recipes for immortality, secret prophecies about the end of times, contact with those the Sumerians called the Anunnaki, those who from heaven to earth came. We were looking for lost technologies that allowed for the construction of the pyramids, the great wisdom of our ancestors that would explain who we are and why we are here. We were waiting for a miracle. The voice of gods recorded on clay. And then, a technology emerges that promises to break this silence. A neural network trained to work like an autocomplete for cuneiform. It analyzes context and millions of known signs, predicting the most likely symbols on broken clay. It doesn't just translate, it reconstructs what was lost, completing words on the fracture lines. Its speed is thousands of times faster than a human's. What would take a team of scientists a year, the machine does in a few hours. The project is launched. The archives of the world's largest museums are digitized and fed into the system. The machine started working. The data began to flow. And it produced a result. It was staggering, but not at all what everyone expected. 90% of the deciphered text turned out to be the ancient equivalent of the internet. Yes, no secret prophecies, no recipes for immortality from the Anunnaki. Instead, a giant buzzing hive of human routine, frozen in clay for 5,000 years. Here is the first documented customer complaint in human history. A tablet from the city of around 1750 BC. A man named Nani writes to a supplier named Ea Nasir. The text is verbatim. "You have sent me copper ingots of poor quality. You told my messenger, if you want to take them, take them. If you don't want to take them, leave. For whom do you take me, that you treat me with such contempt?" And that's just the beginning. It gets worse. The stream of data became an avalanche of daily life. Debt receipts, marriage contracts. Divorce records where the parties divide their property, down to the last pot. Lawsuits over land boundaries. Arguments over missed grain delivery deadlines. Accounting records. Thousands, tens of thousands of accounting records. And the most devastating of all, school tablets. Clay notebooks, where a student clumsily writes the same symbols over and over, while in the margins, a teacher marks a bad grade in red and writes a note. 5,000 years ago. Stop. Think about that for a second. We expected contact with a higher intelligence. We hoped to hear the voice of gods. We were searching for the keys to building the pyramids and the secrets of levitation. Instead, we found the ancient equivalent of the IRS, bailiffs, and angry reviews on an online marketplace. No precursor technologies, no star charts, no philosophical revelations. Just people. And this is where everything cracks. AI, the technology of the future, did not reveal the secrets of the gods to us. It surgically exposed the most inconvenient, most unpleasant truth about ourselves. We thought that over thousands of years we had become different, smarter, more complex, deeper. We built skyscrapers, went to space, created artificial intelligence. But at our core, in our basic settings, we have remained the same. We still argue with contractors, fight over inheritances, complain about service, and try to evade taxes. Centuries pass, empires fall, languages die. Technologies change beyond recognition, but human nature doesn't. We thought neural networks would show us how great and inscrutable our ancestors were. Instead, they showed us that our ancestors were just us. And that is the most unsettling discovery of all. We created artificial intelligence to unlock the secrets of the cosmos, but its first revolutionary achievement was to resurrect the dead. Algorithms caught Bible forgers red-handed, who worked 2,000 years ago. They read books burned by Vesuvius, once thought to be ash. They brought back the voice of a dead empire whose language was forgotten. And right now, at this very second, they are assembling the primordial history of humanity from 300,000 clay fragments. This is not a metaphor. This is a progress report. The Vesuvius Challenge continues. In 2024, they plan to decipher 90% of one of the scrolls. What will we find there, and what other unshakable facts of ancient history will have to be rewritten? The next 2 or 3 years promise a new meta-analysis of the Kushan script. Will the data from different groups align, or will we have to change the textbooks again? I understand why the old theories are so appealing. They are convenient and beautiful, and that's why they are so easily repeated. But one look at the microscopic details that a machine can see is enough to feel uneasy. Because this is where the familiar version breaks, and what comes next is what the textbooks prefer to keep silent about. History is no longer set in stone. It is being rewritten right now by lines of code. At this point, the official version of history as something static and unchangeable is over. Period. Save this video. Look up the projects I mentioned, the Vesuvius Challenge, Fragmentarium. Tell me in the comments which of these cracked codes shatters your worldview the most. And turn on notifications, because in the next episode, we will apply this same method to artifacts that science simply calls impossible. If a machine can read the invisible and understand the forgotten, ask yourself one question. How many more official historical dogmas will crumble tomorrow when we feed another unreadable artifact into a neural network?